about that, did he?
No.
George, it was about 10 years ago that I sold one of the first CPM systems in Lawrence Livermore Labs.
Yeah.
We hear an awful lot of talk about video, text, and cable is the real technology that will bring these kinds of services into the average home. Is there sort of competition between cable-delivered services and telephone-delivered services like yours?
Well, it's typically going to be then connected to a larger computer system where there's some sort of a database that gives you the facts and figures that you're going to try to put together then.
You certainly
do with it, and how long will it take before I'm bored with it or I've exhausted the educational value. And I can...
And enhances it for retrieval. With a high-resolution monitor, an excellent image can be recalled from thousands in storage in about 8 seconds. The ubiquitous floppy disk is not yet an endangered species.
Basic elements of speech. It puts the phonemes together for the words. It massages them to make sure that they flow the way natural speech does, and then that's converted to a set of parameters for a speech synthesizer, which then produces speech.
When you
will be able to access information about your account by voice. At the sound of the tone, please enter your 3-digit access code, 1 digit at a time.
3, 5, 7.
Did you say 3, 5, 7?
Yes.
1 moment, please.
That's how it's set up. And here you can see that I just drew the tie and rolled it up on your neck.
So you captured the...
is not stuck. In this case, the information is unknown. The user indicates that the sandstone strata is permeable and that the specific gravity of the drilling fluid is 1.24. But when the system requests the fluid-specific gravity of the sandstone strata, the user becomes confused. While the previous questions indicated a sensible line of reasoning, the user does not understand the relevance of this question to the overall problem. Rather than answering the question, the user types why. The drilling advisor then presents an explanation of the specific reason.
Software development or extensive customer support, with some exceptions.
Okay, in just a moment we'll take a look at one of the newest chapters in Apple Computer's approach to ergonomic design, the Macintosh, and that's coming up next. Joining us now is Susan Kerr. Susan is an icon designer with the Macintosh for it to get its information together. Is it superficial in a way? I mean, can you really come up with a meaningful...
called Archon. Now, since I was playing with a chess set when we started, you might...
What are its characteristics that make it different than some other language as applied to artificial intelligence?
It became very important to put these people at ease and to make them own the process. So office automation, we involved the people that were involved in office automation in the early stages, which were largely word processing, secretaries in the decision-making process. We wanted them to feel comfortable with what they were getting, we wanted them to know why, and we kind of wanted them to own the decision because they are the basis and the backbone of our decision. So people was important to us. The second thing was integration. We needed an environment where our secretaries and our middle managers in Dallas could talk to New York, could talk to London, whatever our cases or whatever the case might be that you want.
Mainframe, though, given the direction that personal computers are going these days, I expect that within a few years, at most, our systems will in fact run on future personal computers. On this element, by the way, of interactivity, we are so concerned about that that we have spent a lot of time ensuring that our systems provide full explanation of how they came to the conclusions they came to. We think that managers and professionals do not have the ability to point at the computer and say, the computer told me to make that loan, now it's too bad that the company went bust or whatever. We think that really our products have to work as a staff assistant in the same way that a good...
We're seeing some increased popularity in word processing and in graphics programs also.
Particularly graphics programs that will describe the space shuttle. If you saw the movie The Right Stuff, you would see in the sequence with John Glenn. This
of just the manuals and documentation and the programs themselves into English. Michael, what about, let's take MSX as another example. Now, that is a machine that could compete with the different databases that are available.
Well, we have databases in virtually every area.
CIC's Handwriter treats kanji as graphics. Its built-in dictionary...
You mentioned that some programmers have not liked COBOL in the past. Why is that? What is it about it that created a problem?
The testing of superconductive materials and new chip designs is underway at the government's electrotechnical laboratory.
Up until now, we've really been looking at microcomputers, really personal computers, and this is really a different class of machine. The biggest
and design director with Aaron Marcus and Associates in Berkeley, and next to Michael is Don McKinney, vice president with Silicon Graphics here in Mountain View in the Silicon Valley. Herb?
Michael, the way that you would build one of these models is by starting on something called the attribute screen.
Here's a little volume control. You can see the speaker. So every now and then you hear a beep with Mac when you turn it on, or sometimes during applications. If you're at home by yourself and you're listening to the stereo, you might want to know that you'll always hear those beeps. If you're a student working in the library, you can move it so that just the bar will flash.
The products on display ranged from the very clever to the very advanced, with a particular emphasis on Asian applications.
Exclusion of the other. But choosing between them is difficult. It's a matter of application, it's a matter of cost, and it's a matter of efficiency and exactly what we're going after. The principal issue in baseband is probably its simplicity, and that results in cost savings, and it results in savings of installation and ongoing maintenance. The principal issue in broadband is its multiple channels, allowing multiple applications, something that baseband simply can't do, and I would characterize broadband as being somewhat more complex and somewhat more costly. However, if you need that application,
and we got to type it in again. And there we go. And now this is the file that actually was down.
AT&T seems well positioned to be a major player in the field of computers and communications, having added computers to its communications expertise. But IBM has added communications to its computer expertise by acquiring Rome Corporation, a major telecommunications firm. Robin Garthwaite has more on the IBM Rome connection.
Opening the lines of communication. That's what Rome Corporation and other telecommunications companies are helping the computer user to do.
Let's just take a brief look at those 62 companies, which we'll just roll right through here. They're in any range.
Keystrokes. Turn that into a pretty impressive demonstration.
Typing in a command, which you notice flips us back talking to the PC, and it's now possible to take that file that we downloaded and print it out on the printer.
That which is artistically drawn with that which is real-life photograph, sort of a thing. How is that done?
Well,
the concurrent system and concurrent CPM it's what's called a real-time system. That is, it
at differential diagnosis. In addition to that, industries have used expert systems for engineering purposes. The configuration of computers from customer orders or business equipment systems. The use of expert systems for assisting in the design of integrated circuits. The use of expert systems for diagnosing equipment failures, for example, computer equipment failures.
On that subject, Ed,
what we call traditional AI, it really doesn't satisfy that criterion now. It's a sense of real intelligence. I think that'd be fair to say, wouldn't it?
I think to the degree that intelligence is...
And we see a menu of some artists' choices, and if I can, I'm going to try to communicate to you here in some computer graphics.
Changes in your stock portfolio at the close of trading today.
Which a series of plates are formed. These are the molds for making copies.
Those programs, and so there's a whole layer of programming languages that fit in that category that maybe an end user might not even want to consider, at least until they've had some experience with programming languages.
And Paul Schindler, West Coast editor for Information Systems News. Gary.
Halcyon that are similar to HAL, let's say, it would be the speech recognition, the speech synthesis, and some form of intelligence and learning.
That's correct.
Okay, good.
Now, how important is the laser disc component to this? Is the laser disc just carrying the pictures here or the logic?
And you tell me what you want to do with it, and then I'll tell you which one's better.
I think that's probably the most important point about languages, is that it's, if you use it.
Well, it's fairly free form. We're basically describing our interest using and or and not logic with keywords that we put into the computer. In terms of the personal computer, one thing to think of is that dialogue is a peripheral of some 140 gigabytes to your personal computer at the end of a telephone line.
Okay, and we talk
and order your tickets and your hotel reservations and your car reservations.
And you get those verified out at the time that you're dialing.
Right. Depending upon the time constraints that you're under, they will either send you the tickets in the mail or you can pick them up at the airport. So you can take your travel plans from beginning to end through the system.
Kinds of computer crime that we have here in the United States, but they are just now starting to understand that problem. And of course they're trying to address the U.S. market, where they don't quite understand the criminal problems that we have in this country. Crime is a very cultural thing.
Like the extremely successful bullet train, Japan's supercomputers herald a new generation.
Meeting for Monday, sometime on Monday, for what would...
See what Iris does. Don, how does your Iris system here differ from what we've seen up until now?
And actually, I've tracked it back to intuitions that Babbage had that were reported by Ada Lovelace, after whom the Ada programming language is named. In 1842, Ada Lovelace wrote that the analytical engine of Babbage's constituted the link between the mechanical world and the world of the most abstract concepts. That currently, in the modern terminology, is called the physical symbol system hypothesis and is the basis for artificial intelligence work. In artificial intelligence as a science, we talk about the use of computers to process symbolic knowledge.
Combined in a package here that really makes a story and what is that unique part of it?
Well, first of all, I think the speech recognition is the most advanced speech recognition that's ever been put on the marketplace. Yes, there has been speech recognition. There has never been speech recognition of the high caliber that this has. It has the ability to understand up to a 200-word vocabulary.
Take this staff to the ferry circle in the...
Opportunities are not in computers. Where are these areas in which there are opportunities?
Peripherals, add-ons, software.
Now, I'm trying to get a computer company going than it was a decade ago.
Well, a decade ago, there was a great recession. There was also a situation in which the capital gains taxes were much higher than they are today, some 50%. With the capital gains taxes like that, and with the recession, the stock market for new issues was abysmal, to say the least. It was essentially non-functional entirely.
And how about today?
Today,
I'm Susan Bimba, sitting in for Stuart Chaffee. In the Random Access Files this week, the government is investigating 12 semiconductor makers across the country. All are suspected of selling faulty, counterfeit, or inadequately tested chips. Officials of National Semiconductor say it's likely the company will be indicted soon as the result of a grand jury inquiry. National Semi has been under investigation for about 2 years, suspected of inadequately testing chips it sold to government contractors. The chips have been used in everything from military jet bombers to satellites to radios and walkie-talkies. In 1982, National Semiconductor admitted its chips hadn't gotten the required hours.
Presented this to the user in a way that communications becomes a natural modality at last. We've taken the telephony, just plain old phone, hooked it into the machine such that the user really can control who they're calling. For example, a telephone call would come in, you can put the name of the person who called, and you can have a whole history of your last 5 conversations with that person.
I don't think it's a limit. In fact, I've not seen any physical quantity
an effect. Cut the number of cars that they produce to become profitable. And again, that's computer-aided.
Most of the problem has been from amateur white-collar criminals. However, now we're starting to see
but also highly developed telecommunication functions.
And these products are really designed for the communication-intensive knowledge worker who
can't afford to have to say, I can't get any phone calls, I can't make any phone calls, I'm on...
No, the CDC Star was I guess a supercomputer, 10 years ago, and it was a different architecture, and it was basically an array processing machine. And one of the difficulties that came about with the Star was that it really required different kinds of compilers.
Indeed, we'll see a demonstration of COBOL, Forth, Logo. We'll talk about Pascal. First, though, let's try to understand a bit better this problem created by having so many different programming languages.
This multilingual keyboard can perform the tasks of interpreter, grammatical advisor, and artist.
As an example where the standard text is color-coded in blue, the information that you normally change when you do a new letter, maybe to a new customer, is color-coded in yellow, and the information that's critical is color-coded in kind of a maroon color. And particularly if you notice the last line says, continued non-receipt of this payment will jeopardize future...
a little bit farther, and so rather than just taking those 62 that are right there, I'd like to use some data that's in the database to help me with that. And so...
Returning to the dialogue, the drilling advisor is asking the user for the free point, the point below which the drill string...
Coding in small pits or bubbles, forming the digital code later read back by a low-energy laser.
High-cost license that lets you take the software and actually change it or rearrange it or make it different for your specific kind of computer. Computer manufacturers or software companies buy source code licenses, and Microsoft is one of those companies. Microsoft has purchased Unix source code and has fixed it, changed it, enhanced it, whatever, so that it runs on different kinds of microcomputers. It runs on the Tandy System 16, the Apple Lisa, the Fortune Systems 3216. It's rumored they'll be introducing it for the IBM PC XT. So Xenix is just Unix with a few enhancements for...
Our subject today is business applications, Herb, and the first thing I wanted to ask to get going is lots of businesses are making that transition into the use of computers to solve business problems. In some cases it seems to work out very well. Frankly, in other cases, people aren't so happy with this process. What makes the difference between succeeding and failing in using a computer in your business?
And sees it everywhere, from neatly packaged lunchboxes to high-tech toys. But most Japanese companies seem to admit that when it comes to computers, they lack the competitive edge, for now.
Stuart, it looks like there are a lot of manufacturers in different countries that like to bring computers onto the shore, but it really is a Japanese challenge that our manufacturers are concerned about.
We're going to talk about that next, Gary. We have Michael Miller.
In the IBM PC is controlling this monitor, and I am going to illustrate the substitution of a microphone and my voice for the key.
Most reviewers have given the Mac excellent marks. However, some say that the lack of color on the Mac may limit its appeal.
How they're likely to think and how they're likely to close a sale.
Accessing the underlying knowledge base, looking at the various states of the components. And by the way, the states of these particular components can be accessed directly into the instrument or into the nuclear reactor.
Now you can actually interrogate.
And actually I've tracked it back to intuitions that Babbage had that were reported by Ada Lovelace, after whom the Ada programming language is named. In 1842, Ada Lovelace wrote that the analytical engine of Babbage's constituted the link between the mechanical world and the world of the most abstract concepts. That currently, in the modern terminology, is called the physical symbol system hypothesis and is the basis for artificial intelligence work. In artificial intelligence as a science, we talk about the use of computers to process symbolic knowledge.
Right now, the Compact Portable sells for $2,995. That's $200 more than the IBM Portable. With a projected $500 cut, the Compact will sell for $300 less than the IBM Portable.
As an ingenious collaboration between digital imagery and robotics...
Other menu, and we can ask number 5 to read our mail.
And it's now going to...
In a
lot of ways, it does the same types of things that Gary's CPM does. I think Gary can tell you about some variants of CPM which are very different from what MS-DOS currently does. It's basically the same thing. It allows you to
take care of files, take care of transfer of data from one place to another. It takes care of the whole human interface between you, your fingers, a computer.
Yes, it includes the stress. It includes, you know, a phoneme isn't a fixed element. It starts at one point and it flows to another point.
Fiber optics and digital code are doing for the telephone.
Share that. And most of the network activity has been around that set of issues. Those happen to be very low-level primitive issues compared to the entire problem. And over time, we're seeing attention.
The program then fills in the missing frames that simulate movement between those points. Making a drawing come to life is the most tedious part of an animator's job. Fortunately, it is also readily adaptable to digital processing. The systems used to produce these images are not designed to replace artists, but to assist them. And with enough human talent, they can mimic reality in detail.
Mike, you have your company's system up here, and the hypothetical we're creating here is, suppose the Computer Chronicles show would like to buy a software company, okay? And we want to use your system to help us make that decision. And we initially, I think, identified, 62 software companies that were out there. Now, how would you use this system to give me the information we needed to make that decision?
Okay, what we have personal computers is a good, something like the culture-oriented good. So from Japan, it's very difficult to export our personal computers to the United market. In other words, IBM is very difficult to export IBM personal computer to Japan. So the culture's problems is very important.
Travels in a nanosecond. She claimed that this is a fundamental limitation to the speed of computing. And what's your feeling on that? Has that been solved by various techniques?
And they haven't been along with the Apple and the thousands of peripherals and the thousands of softwares. And they think every time they're doing it for the first time ever. They're going to get a couple of their own hobby computer magazines that are in their group. They don't come to our group. They're going to start talking and having little trade shows and showing each other projects, and they'll start new businesses of their own. And I think that's probably about to happen.
In scientific and technical fields, business and medicine, a database search can squeeze an hour or a month's worth of research into a few minutes.
Maybe at first it's a little difficult to use the menu, to learn to think and actually read at the same time while you're drawing. But once you've worked with the system for a short period of time, it's just like second nature. Very simple to use, set up in artist terms.
You're talking about the pinball construction set.
Right.
And this is kind of a nice game because it actually involves you in the construction of the game itself. It's kind of like a metagame. Is the success of that been pretty good in the sense that it's able to switch between programs in very short time intervals and, for example, be able to receive data over a modem while you're seeing the directory operation. Now, but laser storage is completely different. It starts with movies and it leads to computer-controlled video, write-once devices, and phenomenal storage densities for digital storage in a computer. It's my favorite subject right now.
Okay, we've got sitting in this week for Gary Kildall. Herb, what I'm working on right now is a business applications program called Lotus 123. It's one of the more popular business application packages right now. The 123 stands for situation.
It's actually, yeah, it's actually very successful. I've used it myself, and so has a number of customers across the country in beta testing. And we modified it so that it would work more appropriately. And what we're getting back from customers, over 1,000 of them across the country now, is that it is very useful. And just planning a strategy before you do anything.
Jim, while we're waiting at the moment, and in just a few seconds, matter of fact, we're going to take a look at a demonstration of speech recognition with a device that plugs into your, or in this case, our IBM PC. And that's coming up in just a moment.
Sales?
Which product line, standard or deluxe?
Deluxe.
Earlier, we discussed the computer's ability to talk and listen. The correct terminology for these functions is computer voice response, CVR, for talking, and automatic speech recognition, ASR, for listening.
You do have to be interactive. And the reason is that you're in a decision-making process, and it's very close to an innovation.
Drawing the lines in and so forth.
Yes. Everything that you see on this screen here was created by directly keying in the lines, the text, the X's, the square brackets, the whole thing.
Particular drive is just a very simple mechanism, again identical to the consumer already popular.
Only then, if Japanese consumers respond favorably, will the product go overseas.
So for distribution of games or conceivably educational programs and that kind of thing, you are able to bring in all of the things that one would normally have with a computer, the computer graphics and so on, but you can now also bring motion and still frame pictures that are full television quality and even combine those two on the screen
Okay,
together.
Jeff, before we run out of time, I want you to push start button.
Computers rather than someone who sells them. I have an administrative post in the university. I'm in charge of the training program, for example, for our secretaries. It's very interesting to see that we have to screen people from the very beginning. When they first come in for an interview, we have to talk to them about computers because there are a lot of people out there who are very afraid of them. I think that's also one of the major challenges of office automation is getting people who feel comfortable even starting with the machines. There are a lot of people who have genuine fears of it. Even managers, well, I might say especially managers, often have that kind of fear.
Independent recognition is a notably more difficult technology, and one of the consequences of that is you normally have a comparatively more limited vocabulary. The other dimension along which the technology can be evaluated has to do with the distinction between discrete words and continuous words. We also have that available in the lab, and there are a few other vendors in the market supplying that. That allows you to say instead of 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, without pauses in between.
And how to foil this new breed of information thief is a problem faced by a growing number of companies and institutions.
Let's see what this is.
Okay, so what I'm doing now is I'm sitting at the runway. I'm going to accelerate the plane as it goes toward the building. I'm turning the rudder now using the mouse and locking in on a direction. And then I'm going to sweep around and get back onto the main runway. And now as I'll accelerate the plane still further, raise the flaps, just like in a normal takeoff, I can switch between the viewing angle of the pilot looking out the front of the window to the viewing angle of the from the tower, and now I'm off the ground.
Done. That's very impressive.
A greater data rate, and even bring the tangle of wires and cables almost under control. There are a number of ways that information gets shared within a network, along the arms of a star, around a ring, or through a bus. Messages either get automatic priority or travel like tokens from one station to another. Of course, the real advantage of all this is to the user.
There's a terminal configuration that has a little floppy disk on top, but the basic computer that we're using here is a Motorola 68000, often used in some of the other reasonably high-performance microcomputers. The other chips that we actually have are called what we call our geometry engine, and it's a high-speed three-dimensional floating point calculation unit that runs at 6.5 million floating point operations per second. This speed we are planning to enhance to over 10 million floating point operations just in a few minutes.
What's the
On my car anymore, and yet I sure pay attention when it talks to me. And of course there.
で、したがってデバイスではジョセフソンジャンクションとハイエレ
The
クトロンモビリテ
technology
ィト
we
ラ
are
ンジスタ
exploring to reach this speed includes Josephson junctions, high electron mobility transistors, and gallium arsenide.
それからそのアーキテクチャの方で
In
は
terms of architecture, we will have to develop a much higher degree of parallel processing.
処理する方法というのを追求しようと
We are also working on new software suitable for this kind of architecture.
開発というのも同時に行おうとしています。
Niels, where do you see the future practically going in AI? What's the biggest potential market, if you will, for these kinds of applications?
To avoid or correct accidents that occur during the drilling process. Since an offshore oil rig...
Chip experts are saying the 4-megabyte chip will require electronic connections of 1 micron or less. If you don't know, a micron is about 1/1100th the width of a human hair. The Semiconductor Industry Association says boom times are back for chip makers. Estimates are...
the recognition of speech, trainable speech recognizer is something that's available today. And also the speech synthesis is also something that's available. So
Now, take a good look at this opening screen. It's the last color you're going to see. This is a serious, no-frills program. The entry screens are nothing fancy, like Joe Friday says, just the facts, ma'am, and the graphics are nothing to write home about. All this program does is help you.
With the computer applications, but some are not. What makes the difference between a happy customer and one who isn't?
A profusion of low-cost machines attracting some very young customers.
Capabilities of the machine. What kind of hardware, software supporting this system?
You can't do it perfectly, but if you are in a portion of the field where the technology or certain functional limitations have formed the boundary of where you could go, as those possibilities get moved forward, then, or as you expect them to be moved forward, you can expect that the offerings by IBM are most likely going to move in that direction.
Okay,
and
so you sort of indicators of what's going on, right? Lori, I know that you've been involved.
The choices we have, the decisions we have to make in terms of trying to attack this problem. We see we have a total of 12 different remedies we could apply to this situation to try to solve the problem. And more information I can get is to actually apply one of these remedies, say in this case Alpha 2, which is using a vaccine in that particular case.
I noticed also that it was showing you the percentage probability that a certain remedy would actually help. So this is where the computer...
Absorbing more and more of the traditional desktop tools. In some of the latest designs, communication and data manipulation are combined into one small module, bringing together telephone, word processors, spreadsheets, files, and electronic mail. Digital voice storage is incorporated.
Specific areas where this is a different sort of program is that instead of requiring explicit statement of rules to build a system, it only requires examples of previous decisions, previous tasks, previous diagnoses to build the systems. And that's going to break through, I believe, the knowledge engineering bottleneck mentioned by people like Edward Feigenbaum in building these systems.
Jeffrey, you have...
In fact, if the Japanese made machines to the IBM standard, it would just lead to a kind of price war. It would not improve anything. Instead, the Japanese companies are trying to produce machines with higher standards, a higher level of functions. The bigger the gap between Japanese and American computers, the better the chances are for new Japanese machines.
To connect its various branches into an integrated, decentralized resource.
But it exists, and it's a well-established standard. But there are network technology standards themselves at the, if you will, the cable level of what kind of cable we're going to install and how we're going to...
Than the fastest known today, one that is capable of 10 billion flops per second.
Joining us now is Rick Dyer. Rick is president.
Sources available to them, to individuals. For example, Unix, that has become widely used in commercial environments. So what effect does that have when people that really can get at the source programs? Have you seen any effect from that at all? We could...
And up to 512K of ROM. Prices are not set, but will begin around $1,300.
Those are decision support systems, and like some of these other things we've talked about, the first trouble is trying to do... Eric Kildall is Herb Lechner of SRI. Herb, what we have up on our Apple computer here today is the Koala Micro Illustrator and my handy Koala pad here.
Move the current drill string up or down. The upper left of the screen is devoted to a typed dialogue between the user and the knowledge system. The entire right half of the screen serves in the prototype to display the internal operation of the knowledge system. This is mostly used for debugging. At the lower left of the screen, the current drilling environment is diagrammed. This includes representations of 6 major causes of sticking. Initiating a session with a drilling advisor, the user types the name of the well. The system then retrieves from its disk storage any information that had previously been...
and it's loading off the disk, and it's also giving me the prompt telling me it's ready to go. Now I'm just going to say
a significantly more secure computer system today than we have ever had in the past. However, we have to be aware that no computer system commercially available today is adequately secure relative to the value.
As you can see here, it's loading in this microcomputer.
What do you mean by parts of the images you don't want, Michael?
Well, for instance, maybe I want
to. So we want to schedule an appointment here. So we hit PF1, which says, I want you to go out there and pull in that part of the system that calls for scheduling appointments.
How about the last 5 years?
Okay, last 5 years.
No problem. So.
And it's putting together the graph right now?
Right. So it's back there thinking away. And preparing a graph on those two companies, which I've promptly forgotten. Selecting out the last 5 years. It asked me if I want to save this for later on. I said, no, let's move right ahead.
Japanese industry has a firm tradition of introducing new products in the domestic market first.
Early computers were fast electromechanical switching devices, often relying on the same simple relays used by the telephone company.
Talking about the source again, do you have problems, or maybe, Roger, you have the same problem, in not being able to keep up with the demand? I know one of the complaints about some of these services are slow.
The future demand, the system reviews records of train capacities, labor costs, taxes, fuel costs, and revenues to predict the financial impact of alternative strategies. The potential risks and benefits of various models can be demonstrated graphically.
We've just achieved orbit. There's your upstream rolling underneath. The external tank will
Random access is made possible by a grant from Popular Computing, a McGraw-Hill magazine.
Can be used.
What kind of machine, what's the hardware we're using here, Don?
As part of a nationwide experiment, eastern Pennsylvania is being wired with a fiber optic network capable of transmitting 1.7 billion bits of data per second.
Technical approaches to speech synthesis.
Yes.
Can you say a little bit about where do we stand in the state of the art on the recognition side?
Well, there are
computations per second. Most computers are measured in MIPS, and some are measured in what's called flops. And the difference being that it's either an integer mathematics or it's a floating point mathematics.
Okay. Processors, and it was necessary to have some kind of an operating system to support the language, and that's where the name came from. CPM was a control program for microcomputers, just as PLM was named a programming language for microcomputers. And we were using paper tapes at the time, and we needed to have something else to store programs on besides paper tapes. It was a pretty tedious process. And so floppy disks came around. And
so moving to a digital rather than an analog kind of phone system.
Starting 10 or 15 years ago, digital electronics began to reduce the cost of voice communication, but now more and more, by going digital, not only are you reducing cost, but you're providing communication more suited to computer communication.
Mm-hmm. And Bill, you have an example. Tony said MS-DOS is moving in the direction of Unix. Where is CPM?
There and set up, and this is where I would enter that information.
Okay, Dan, this is obviously much finer drawing, greater resolution than some of the earlier things we saw at the beginning of the program. That's a function of what, Kevin?
That's basically what
that already exist. If mischievous amateurs don't seem too threatening, there's also...
This is Gary Kildall. Gary, we've been hearing for years now about the Japanese threat. Any minute they're about to invade our shores, take over the PC market, just like they did cars and VCRs and cameras and so on.
Go into some other area, good grief, you know, there's probably more opportunity.
Herb's phone situation, are we looking actually at the thing you call call text?
That's right.
Now?
That's right.
Okay, now...
For doing unlimited vocabulary speech recognition has been worked on for a number of years and is being worked on presently. Both ourselves as well as perhaps a dozen other people are working on that, and that is probably 2 to 4 years away.
Carl, I'd like to get you...
Although a local network can operate cheaply along telephone wires called twisted pairs...
Simple so that you don't have to read a lot of instructions. Of course, most people don't want to have to learn how to operate the computer. They want to just do things with it right away. And pinball construction set, you can immediately play one of the pinball games that are included, or you can quickly make up one of your own, and it's very simple to do that, as I think Bill will illustrate. We also like to have products that are hot, in that they should fully use the sound and graphics and other capabilities of the machine. And we also look for programs that are deep. In the case of Pinball Construction Set, you can make your own pinball game, so it has a lot of creative possibilities and allows people to control what they're going to make and interact with it and change it. And that's one of the things that Extend
was built basically for audio. Now, both of these devices are capable of storing digital information. This full-size disc could hold as much as, say, 1.5 million or 1.5 billion.
Not soon. That's a few years out. The third dimension along which it's it's important to analyze the technology is the dimension of scale of vocabulary. Now, there is a fairly close parallel between the synthesis area in terms of a discrete or individual words pre-programmed as we...
30 seconds left. What about cryptography? Is that a solution?
Cryptography is the most powerful safeguard, I think, that has ever been developed in protection of data through communication lines and also as might be stored in computer media. However, we don't have a problem to solve in that area yet, the eavesdropping problem. However, in the future, it will become the most significant safeguard that we have.
Gentlemen, we're out of time. Don Parker, involved in Expert Systems for Micros, and Niels Nielsen, Director of the Artificial Intelligence Center at SRI International. Herb, what's your response?
Well, I was going to say I don't disagree. It's just if you take a look at the commercial world, and instead of rewriting their codes, they've done conversions. And they've taken a real cut at making conversions, and obviously they're not using the supercomputer the way it can be done. It's in a lot of cases, very time-consuming and expensive. And they have a lot of code that they've written over the years, and it's all been built on and changed and added to. And to go rewrite, to do vector coding, to go on and do pure, solid vector coding, it takes a lot of time to rethink the problem.
It's the redevelopment of all those programs.
As a matter of fact, in one case that I've seen this done, they've gotten spectacular results. But it took time and a lot of R&D on their part to do it.
I've used it about 5 years, which makes me a relative newcomer compared to a lot of the people that have been using it, but makes me an old-timer with respect to the microcomputer users. I still haven't used it, actually, on a microcomputer, which is pretty amazing. As I told you earlier, I do use MS-DOS on a variety of computers. MS-DOS is reputed to be moving in the direction of looking more and more like Unix. You might want to tell us about what...
Or expand it to the fringes of our imagination.
Our guests around the table now are Michael Arendt. Michael's a computer artist.
And keep it, if I didn't want to see all of those, I could do it by attribute again, which is to just rank them and keep the...
Okay, could we get to see a graph?
We can go through and I'll give you an example of how we would store one. Let's say your name was Adam. We could put in your name and a password that you would use to access the system. So
I'm trying to build into it. That's what I spend most of my time worrying about.
Literally, you're only up to 256. You're only limited by how much memory you have free. Pictures or messages or documents always available for the terms we use are cutting and pasting.
Maybe you can go to Mac Write and then we could build.
The primary application of the call text is to access any text database invoice over the telephone. It not only is applicable to retrieving electronic mail messages, but for instance, a salesman in a customer's office can call in over the telephone into the database and retrieve that customer's order status, or perhaps the current inventory of a particular part, so that he knows that the customer can place that order in time.
Okay.
The important concept there is that it relieves, it doesn't require the intervention of an operator. It saves the cost of an operator.
Change the font to something like Old English.
Okay, I know you're having fun, Susan, but I'm going to have to stop you.
It's hard when it's your baby not to be enthusiastic.
I'll give you an example of that.
Please.
I'll quickly dial in to our system, although you can dial from any touch-tone telephone. You don't need a special phone like the one that I'm using today.
Welcome to the Schwab Quote Service. Please enter your account number.
Now, if you increase the number of conveyor belts, you can produce more cars. But if you increase the number of belts by 100, for example, don't expect to increase the output by 100 times, because to allocate work to 100 conveyor
games, and that's the subject of our program today, computer games. And Gary, computer games, in fact, were important, weren't they, in getting the whole personal computer thing going?
Well,
From fast action games that demand even faster reactions, to maze-type games where the player threads his way around obstacles.
Do look pretty good. I can specify those two ticker symbols, or I can...
This program has focused on some of the more successful industry entrepreneurs, those who had vision and an insight into the new technology and the perseverance to see their ideas through. For the most part, these individuals had strong technical backgrounds as engineers, programmers, scientists, and the like. And this was enough to get the business off the ground in its very early phase. Later, there came a second phase in the enterprise when a different kind of entrepreneurialism was needed to take the enterprise from a strong technical startup into the successful mature business. Once the ideas are formulated, the investment capital is secured, and the assembly lines are rolling, the product must be sold and serviced, and continuing return realized on the investment. That's when people with strong marketing and financial backgrounds are needed to make the company profitable. Good marketing people are trained not necessarily in high-tech or electronic fields, but in business and product marketing. As the computer industry matures, it becomes more and more like any other business, with all the various departments: design, manufacturing, marketing, sales, public relations, advertising, and the like. The only difference is the speed at which the computer technology changes, which continues to promote competition and entrepreneurialism by all participants in this dynamic field. Our next lesson covers computer security. Be sure and read Chapter 23 of your text, and I'll see you then. I'm Herb Lechner.
Microfocus, creators of visual programming tools for software development, is pleased to provide major funding for the Computer Chronicles, the story of this continuing evolution.